Hi, this is the Philosophical Angle program, and I am your host, Chris Angle. Along with me are my co-hosts, Remy Canario, a
Thanks
political analyst from New York. Good to see you, Remy.
for having me, Chris.
And Rick Samuelson, a venture capitalist on the West Coast. Good to see you, Rick.
Morning.
The purpose of the Philosophical Angle is to analyze the nature and essence of concepts being used in current media. This week we're going to advise the candidates about the concept of the middle class and, speaking economically, how to benefit them the most. And we'll make some comments as to what we think they should do and their stances in their race for the presidency here in 2016. To start, I would like to say that the best way would be to follow the example of Ronald Reagan. And he coined a term, I believe, called trickle-down economics. And that is the best way to benefit the middle class. Well, what is trickle-down economics? Does it work? And why does it work? Well, I think first we need to talk about what is the free market, or what is free market economics. I think it has two dimensions. First, we said free market, so therefore we have to go over the idea of freedom. And freedom is the ability to establish one's priorities and the ability to effectuate those priorities. And priorities are a bit of knowledge about yourself and how you order your life. And so economics, because it's free market economics, is the establishment and the effectuation of the sacrifices and the priorities within those sacrifices to achieve a reward. So when you sacrifice your time and effort and use your information, you're doing so to achieve a reward. And that is basically what economics is. And there's one other dimension which we're going to talk about shortly. And that is, and this produces, when you get a bunch of individuals together establishing these sacrifices to produce a reward, sometimes you get something called competition. And so we really need to also discuss the nature of competition in general. A definition of competition is two or more life entities with the same priority. I know economics probably, if you look it up in a economics text, will probably have something else, but I believe this is the true definition of economics. And when you have two or more entities with the same priority, this is inimical to the individual entities, and the result will be a eschewment of the priorities. Because, and remember, priorities is a knowledge, because when they're after the same thing, in other words, they have the same priority, they're really two in the same space, ecological space. And therefore it's not healthy for the same to be in the same space, ecologically speaking. So they try to change their sacrifice. They try to differentiate, so they're not exactly in the same ecological space. And they do this by changing their priorities. And so this change is good for the individual, and is beneficial overall. And so what happens is that as they change, knowledge also is added. in order to make that change. And the additional knowledge is what benefits society overall, and what makes competition good, and what makes the free market good. Because the individuals eschew being in the same space as somebody else, and so they differentiate, and this adds knowledge and benefit to society. So when we adding this knowledge, it benefits society, and the entities do not do the converse. That is, the life entities do not create knowledge to its detriment. They only create knowledge to their benefit. And so as this overall this knowledge increases in society, the benefits to society also increase because of the number of individuals receiving these benefits and increase, obviously. But does it add to take the benefits individually of society? In other words, is it always good? If the ingredient of cooperation is added, it is always good. So what happens is that even though the individuals receive benefits of the individual knowledge, the reason why it pervades and becomes beneficial to the society as a whole is that we evolved as a species with the attribute of enabling ourselves to cooperate with others. And the essence of cooperation is that it is a priority, a bit of knowledge and effort together. So cooperation pervades through all of society because it's part of the human nature. And why will cooperation filter through all of society? Why will it pervade? Because there is something else that we need to add. And that is the dictum of life's unlimited demand for the good. In other words, life always wants more of what they perceive of that which is good for them. No matter whether the individual is rich or poor, he will seek betterment. The rich will seek greater benefit, they'll always seek to add more benefit to their lives, and the poor will also reach out and seek betterment. Naturally, it's the nature of life's entities. And individuals tend to cooperate to achieve this betterment. And when the rich will reach out for help to achieve betterment, they have to reach out to somebody, and the poor will reach out to offer help, which is they'll sell. They'll sell their effort, their time, their energy. And as this, we'll leave it to the economics professors to figure out how fast this pervades through society. But the ingredients are there for that who is wealthy and who has assets to seek betterment, and for the poor to offer their help. And through cooperation, this will pervade through society and benefit society. So, what do you guys think of the middle class? How is the middle class best served? And what do you propose to tell the candidates how best to serve the middle class in the coming election? Remy, why don't we start with you?
Sure thing. I'm very glad we're addressing this issue because I think that anyone who's watched the phenomenon of Donald Trump and his seemingly his unshakable supporters has got to wonder what's going on. And my analysis is that his message is resonating largely because of the fact that a substantial number of people in this country, what we would call the lower middle and lower classes, have not done well recently. Now, the way I see it, his platform largely consists of three diagnoses and that's the reason that his message is resonating. The first is that free trade has been a disaster for the middle class, that it has made the rich richer while sending good jobs overseas. Next, you have immigration, which then increases competition for the jobs that are remaining and reduces their earning power. And third, you have government programs that benefit minorities, which are perceived to come at the expense of whites in this country. Now, I would argue that those policies that benefit minority are correct in a country that is trying to level the playing field and give everyone an equal shot. The fact of the matter is that race does matter. It does have a detrimental effect to the ability of the individual to achieve the American dream, and so those are inviolable. Immigration's a little trickier. Immigration has lots and lots of benefits for the United States. Not only is it part of our national identity, but it increases our birth rates and population, which is crucial for the health of a modern economy. I mean, just look at the problems that Japan and much of Europe are going to be facing and are facing as a result of a lack of population growth. That being said, is it possible that the immigration system could be tweaked so that its effects are less detrimental to those who are already disadvantaged? Possibly, but I'm not going to pretend to any real expertise on this matter. Which leaves us with free trade. Now, Donald Trump is talking about how we never win anymore, how China is killing us. I mean, in a sense, it isn't true because free trade has produced a net benefit to this country. But what he is spot on with is the fact that it has not, that as the pie has gotten bigger, not everyone's slice has gotten bigger. Now, the way I remember it, free trade was sold as a policy that was going to benefit everyone, a rising tide that was going to lift all boats. Well, that's really not the way that it is played out. The resources in terms of labor and capital that were supposed to be freed up and be put to better use, which would raise everyone's earning potential, have in fact not been reallocated efficiently. They have gone largely towards lower paying jobs, less security, and so on. So I think that this is the one case where there legitimately is a case to be made for change. This was sold on the promise of making everyone better. That's the reason that the public accepted it. And you know what? That's not the way that it worked out. So in the words of Margaret Thatcher, I think the middle class should be saying, "I want my money back." And what exactly does this mean? Well, as I said, the pie has gotten bigger. It just hasn't been distributed the way that it was supposed to be. And I think that it's time that we did something about that, because the people who have gotten richer have done so as a result of government policy, not through any particular merit of their own, and the government shouldn't be in the business of picking winners and losers. Therefore, I think that a system of redistribution of those benefits is not only economically sound, but also a moral imperative. The exact shape that redistribution should take is up for debate. My intuition is that a system of regional reinvestment would be the best approach, whereby parts of the country that have not done well and that have seen a loss of welfare, a loss of education, and a loss of health should receive funds, I think, targeted towards higher education and vocational training. So places along the Rust Belt should receive money in order to provide the opportunities that the people there deserve. Second, I think that if a program could be found to equip those universities, community colleges, and vocational schools with business incubators that provide business know-how and give the people who are benefiting from these programs the chance to actually start a business, that would be a great step in the right direction. And finally, I think the government should be in the business of subsidizing loans to those businesses in order to ensure that the promise of the American dream is available to everyone and not just the people at the very top end of the spectrum.
Rick?
Okay, well, a lot to cover here. Let's start with some of the facts that I've read. Over the last roughly decade, middle-income family income has dropped, I think, $4,000 or so. So it's actually declined, even as other costs have gone up dramatically that aren't necessarily included in the consumer price index, like tuition, for example. I think the starting point for the middle class has to be how to improve the economy and measure that correctly, which is not what's being done today. The Federal Reserve, for example, architects its policy around a measure of unemployment that's not factually correct, because it ignores people who left the workforce, which is just nonsense. They do not use the labor participation rate, which is the more accurate measure of how many people are working. And there are political reasons for that. When you can massage an important statistic like that to make it look better and better and better every year, when in fact it doesn't reflect reality, that looks better from the point of view of the Federal Reserve and other politicians. So it's very understandable as to why this continues to thrive. The same applies to our measure of the Consumer Price Index. If you actually talk to people in the middle class about what worries them, following the whole issue of getting a good job and keeping a good job, it's the cost of tuition, how do they pay for college, and the rising cost of health care. These are two enormous nuts, very expensive, along with buying a house. These are now the three big expenditures the middle class have to support. And the fact that their incomes are measurably declining and have continued to do so, even as the government pretends that unemployment is now at the lowest it's been, in the last several years, is preposterous. And people aren't stupid; they know it, and that's why the middle class is angry. They're being fed a line of nonsense, which is completely inconsistent with their daily experience. In order to grow the economy, you have to start with small business formation. It has always been true in this country that the most jobs are created by small businesses, not by big businesses, small businesses. And that means you have to stimulate business formation. As we speak, over the last several years, more small businesses have failed than have been started. More small businesses have failed than have been started for years. That's a recipe for disaster for the middle class.
Chris, I just want to point out that it seems as though we have the remarkable situation of Richard and I agreeing that the key to this situation is to improve the ability of people who are otherwise disadvantaged to start businesses. There is one factual tweak that I would like to make to what he said, though. And while it is true that small businesses employ the majority of Americans, the more relevant statistic is young businesses versus old businesses. Small businesses, when they are less than 5 years old, are the ones that create jobs, whereas ones that are over 5 years old tend to find the economies of scale and other business tweaks that actually reduce the number of jobs. So while I don't think that we should have a system that punishes success, I think the focus should be put squarely on the ability to start new businesses as opposed to small businesses as a whole.
Well, I think that was Rick's point. Rick?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't disagree with that at all. So how do we get to, how do we reverse this absolutely disastrous trend of recent years? I mean, that's got to be the key question. There are several elements to this, and I deal with this on a regular basis. If you're a small business right now, you can't get a loan from a bank. It's almost impossible. I've dealt with this with specific businesses I'm invested in. And one of the reasons is that the net interest margin, because we've had declining interest rates for so many years, the net interest margin that a bank can earn on a small business loan relative to the risk involved, and these are riskier loans than lending to GE or another large company, is so narrow it's not worth it. So they don't do it.
Is that due to is that due to regulation?
What's that?
Is that due to a regulation? They just can't mark it up in a manner that's commensurate with their profit demands?
Yeah, I mean, when interest rates are, when you're being paid such a small interest rate by the Federal Reserve, and now they're talking about going negative on interest rates, which will squeeze the net interest margin further, then what you can charge on a loan consistently, the whole structure of the interest rate lending regime has been falling. And on a percentage basis, it's much lower than it was when interest rates were normally 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10%, right? No, nobody wants 25% interest rates, right? That's that makes an economy dysfunction as well. But interest rates are now so low, and in Europe they're negative, and this is why you're seeing banks' share prices collapse, right? Deutsche Bank is trading at 30% of book value. It's trading like it's going to go bankrupt. Okay, and this is true of a whole bunch of the European banks, and also the American banks have been hurt very badly because there's a perception, which is accurate, that as net interest margins decline and move towards zero, they can't make any money on lending. Anyway, they have not been lending. Some of the technological innovations, like crowdfunding, have made up the gap. Angel investors like me have made up some of the gap, venture capitalists and so forth, private equity, but not enough. Not enough.
Oh, Richard, I think that this is another thing that we're agreeing on. The ability of small businesses to get loans is not only crucial, but in a very bad state right now. However, it seems a bit counterintuitive to suggest that making money more expensive is going to really benefit those small businesses. So surely we should be looking at policies that don't involve raising interest rates, but rather deal with this problem in another way. And that's why I talked about the issue of subsidizing loans. Now, if these banks were in the position to make a little bit more money through a fiscal transfer as opposed to an interest rate change, now surely that would help the economy in a more direct way than raising the interest rates, which does have the effect of depressing investment.
Well, I think there are other pernicious effects from these low interest rates, and that is that savers are not rewarded. And this is where it hits the middle class right between the eyes. One of the other effects of having zero interest rates is that share prices have become vastly overvalued. In history, they're declining now. The bubble is popping now, but over recent years, share prices have been at the what Goldman Sachs calls the ninth decile of valuation. And that's because of the low interest rates. That's the reason the valuations are so high. This benefits people who own shares, wealthy people. They love it. But for somebody who's got a small savings account, they can't earn any interest. Almost none.
Well, perhaps that suggests a pathway forward. As we're saying, those who are doing well in the investment in investments right now are doing very well, largely because of as a result of government policy. Now, since that isn't anything that they themselves have produced, surely a tax on those gains, which have essentially been handed to them on the government, is not only appropriate, but a great source of funds to do exactly what I'm talking about and make loans more available to those who aren't doing so well.
Don't we have something called the SBA that fits that bill?
Excuse me?
Don't we have something called the SBA that does that already?
Well, if it's doing it, it doesn't seem to be doing it very well.
Okay.
Yeah, I know of venture funds that get SBA loans, and some of them are fairly substantial. I know of one in Oregon, Ashland, Oregon, that invests in local companies, and they're doing it successfully. Okay, those businesses, I think they're invested in 3 or 4. It happens to be called Gilded Rose, the investment fund, and the businesses are all successful. They're not going bankrupt. They're being managed successfully. Members of that fund have positions on the various boards and advise the businesses directly. So there is a role for doing that. I think she got a $30-40 million loan. Don't quote me on that stuff. It's roughly several millions of dollars in loans from and grants from the Small Business Administration.
All right, Rick.
That is a workable model. I think it's one of the arrows that should be in the quiver.
In our last couple of minutes here, I'd like each of you to say what it is that will enable the economy more than anything else to perk up, and what is your final advice to the presidential candidates?
Well, I would say business formation. Increased business formation is critical. That means deregulation. That means normalizing the interest rate regime, which was always the case in the past. Legally preventing a negative interest rate regime, because that is going to be disastrous. I would cite those factors as most important.
Okay, Remy?
For my part, I would say that the candidate should identify government policies that have benefited the very well-off at the expense of the middle class, and tax those funds and use them to do exactly the kinds of things that we're talking about in terms of increasing access to education, increasing access to the know-how that you need to start a business, and making it easier for small businesses to get loans.
Okay, and for my part, I would like to advocate less taxes and less regulation. And I think business creation will pick up to a great degree. Guys, I want to thank you. It's been a pleasure listening, and we'll see you next week on The Philosophical Angle.
Thank you.